So, good morning. I've been blessed and encouraged over the last 10 years to hear many of your stories or parts of your stories. So, I thought it would be worthwhile to take a turn and share some of mine. That and Matt asked me, and I kind of felt like I couldn't say no. But really, honestly, I believe everybody has a really great story to share. Um, so, I guess I'll start with my parents named me Kristen Dene back in 1982 when I was born. So if you do the math, that makes me 37, which just means I'm old to the young folks and young to the old folks. My last name is Stone, owing to the fact that I married Matt in 2007. I'm a mother of two. I love cats, coffee, chocolate chip cookies, desserts in general, histories, weird art, and alone time. And I dislike elevators, airplanes, peas, public speaking, and the current discord caused by social media politics and coronavirus. Can I get an amen? As far as I can remember, I've been an introvert and a loner who is most comfortable being in my own head. This is my safe space. I like it in here. I love making art, especially odd characters of fabric and various junk. I'm a sensitive empath who's always had a heart for the lonely and the outliers. For instance, I used to treat my dolls and stuffed animals and figurines like they were alive and had feelings. And I still kind of do, because if you come into my house, you'll see all of my old, decrepit dolls and the ones that I've made on my walls and on my furniture. And I do kind of feel like creating those figures does something for my spirit, like it's kind of a sacred act creating. I'm better at one-on-one conversations than big, scary group interactions like this. And even though social events drain me emotionally, I very much value my relationships with people, especially genuine people. I'm on a journey just like everyone else. I still consider myself a follower of Christ, even though my faith and beliefs have changed much over the years. My parents took me to church and prayed with me and read the Bible to me, but of course I had to decide if and when I wanted to have any kind of faith in that mysterious being that we call God. Due to the fact that I was extremely introverted growing up, I did not learn how to recognize my inner thoughts or emotions, nor how to express myself to other humans until well into my 20s. I believe that this fundamental disconnect with my true self and others was the major factor in two bouts of depression that I had, one in high school and one in college. Those of you who've had a major depressive episode know the feelings of utter hopelessness and darkness and desolation. I'm assuming that I made it through because of my stable home life and the prayers of others, because I still can't really see how someone can keep going when they're completely devoid of hope in their innermost being. I guess that simply not giving up day after day is a great act of faith, even if there are no feelings to go along with it. Depression taught me the hard way that I'm wired for human connection. So I had to get rid of that weird little idea that I picked up that it could just be me and God and that I didn't really need other people. So besides the major depression, my growing up was kind of pretty standard American for the 80s and 90s. Playing outside with siblings and friends, going to school, church on Sundays and Wednesdays, running errands with mom, playing board games, baking cookies, sometimes an occasional family trip or vacation that was usually fraught with unnecessary drama thanks to us kids. I graduated from Bullet Creek High School in 2001 and then Saginaw Valley State University in 2006 with a major in art and minors in history and sociology. So, money well spent. Of course, I floundered a bit with the what am I doing with my life existential crisis. And that was answered in part when I ended up getting engaged to Matt Stone, moving to Grand Rapids area. I also accepted a customer support job, which was made infinitely better by the fact that it was all over the phone and I didn't have to interact with people face to face. So let's skip ahead to a big part of the story that kind of sticks out, the cancer diagnosis. Bum, bum, bum. Looking back, I think that the growth on my left parotid gland started sometime in the winter of '04, '05, because I remember living on campus at SVSU, and I only did that for 1 year. And I would get out of class, trudge back to my room, up several flights of stairs, and then just sleep. And I also didn't have any appetite. I specifically remember a quart of Blue Bunny ice cream that sat in my freezer until it went bad. And I kept thinking, I should eat that. But I didn't want any. So in hindsight, those are pretty big red flags for a health concern. But since I didn't really have anyone looking after me, I dealt with it. I think my body must have compensated because 5 years later, when I finally went to an ear, nose, and throat doctor, shout out to Dr. Taylor at Grand Rapids Ear, Nose, Throat is amazing, and he's a U of M grad. The lump by my left ear wasn't really a concern for me or him. So he did a biopsy, and the biopsy revealed normal cells. But still, he wanted it removed so it didn't keep growing and pressing on my face nerve. I was so afraid of surgery that I almost turned him down. But my good girl sensibility went out, and I let him schedule me for surgery, which was St. Patrick's Day 2010. It went well, and I thought that was that, until I went to his office to get my stitches removed, and he had Matt come in the room with me, which should have made me nervous. And he proceeded to somberly tell me that the pathology lab found the growth was a type of slow-growing cancer that he called an adenocarcinoma. And apparently it had been encased in some normal cells, which is why the biopsy was normal. I didn't cry or freak out. I just kind of felt sick and dumbfounded, and I kind of was my brain wasn't really registering why this cool, hip, funny young doctor was telling me that I had the big C cancer. It was just not really making any sense. So I have brought a Facebook post that I shared sometime after these events, which my grandma CJ, in her low-tech grandmotherly wisdom, printed off and snail mailed to me because she thought I'd want to keep it. And it turns out the joke's on me, and she was right, because I quit Facebook and lost all my posts, even though I'm back on Facebook now with a new profile. So I'll go ahead and read this thing that I had posted. I begged God to miraculously remove the growth from my parotid gland the night before my surgery. I had enough faith that he could, as I had many nights before. But he didn't do what I asked. Instead, my path went through Dr. Taylor and the other doctors, nurses, and anesthesiologists, through surgery, and bad news, and radiation therapy at a wonderful facility 10 minutes from where I lived, an amazing radiation doctor, a huge lifetime debt, and Providence to cover pretty much all my debt. It's laughable and amazing how little of that debt I paid, because I just couldn't. Why wouldn't God answer my prayer and do what I asked? I don't really care why anymore. I love to consider the path by which He's led me. A scoffer could easily explain the facts, diagnosis, the educated doctor's hard work, medical advancements and discoveries, and generous hospital donors. And factually, these are all correct. But why should I be the recipient of the generosity, healing abilities, and kindness of so many people who had nothing to gain from helping me? That is where I see the hand of God most. As the song With Every Act of Love so aptly puts it, God put a million doors in the world for His love to walk through, and one of those doors is you. So, for some reason, I love epic adventures like Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, everything nerdy. But I'm always doing my level best to not live an adventure. I don't really want to do that. Discomfort, unknowns, scary circumstances, no thanks. And I always wonder if that makes me a coward or a human. or both. So I've learned some good lessons along the way, some things I think are good lessons. Maybe you'll agree, maybe you won't. And I'll share 10 of them right now. I don't even know if these are the top 10. These are just 10 good ones. So I've learned not to judge others, and I have a funny story that doesn't make me look too bad to go along with this one. When I was about 19 and taking an art class, there was a lady in her mid-50s called Dana, and I remember that she, all the kids liked her because she was like grandmotherly and giving advice and, all that life experience to kind of share with us. And I was pretty quiet, so I usually just listened to their conversations. But she was like outspoken and kind of would challenge the professor sometimes and kind of sassy. And so one day I overheard her tell a student that she was married to a pastor. And I just remember being like completely floored and thinking, Jane is a pastor's wife? Because I obviously had a conception in my head that a pastor's wife was, quiet and demure and, whatever. And so, now when I think about 19-year-old Kristen judging other people like that, I just kind of shake my head like, well, you were ignorant. God bless you. Yeah. And, it's good that we keep growing up. So number 2, I've learned to hold my beliefs like this instead of like this, because my overarching belief is that God is bigger and better than I can possibly know or understand. These days, I'm kind of loath to tell people what to believe, but there are some things I wish everyone would be able to believe, like God loves you, and God has good for you. And it is better to step into the life of love, joy, and peace with God than to go a lesser, darker path without the life of God dwelling in you. I've changed position on points of doctrine over the years, as well as naturally developing my own doctrine, so to speak, based on reading of Scripture and understanding, my own understanding and my observance of God through nature and circumstances. I try to let the knowledge that God is love lead me, though it doesn't necessarily keep me from being selfish and ornery on a daily basis. Number 3 is, here we go. Living out my love for God and others in the day-to-day situations is more important and real to me than trying to perfect my orthodox head beliefs. Have you ever met a religious person that can tell you everything they believe and throw scriptures at you and tell you why you should believe like they do, but is really lacking in grace, love, empathy, genuineness, and all the other good stuff that you would think would mark a person who worships the God called love? It's a bad look. And I think that it's pitiable and a poor representation of what we can be as we grow up in God. It really doesn't matter what right Christian doctrines we think we believe in our heads if we are unloving, unkind, selfish, etc. So something I try to ask myself is, are my head beliefs leading me into deeper communion with God, a loving God, and loving relationships with others? Or am I harsh toward myself and others in ways that deny the love and goodness of God? Number 4, I've learned that people who get others to do what they want them to do through shame or threat have not won any battles that matter. In fact, they are losing when it comes to their own soul's health. Side note, guilt is different than shame. So guilt means I believe I've done something bad, while shame means I believe I am bad. And I feel compelled to tell you that you are not bad. What you are is good. Trying to shame a child, a spouse, or anyone into doing what you want them to do is the opposite of the full and free life God gives to us. In hindsight, there were some times when my parents parented through shame, but I understand after listening to bits and pieces of their stories that they were raised certain ways, and I believe they were following suit. And the love that they consistently gave really did cover over any wrongs. Such love and provision is especially noted by me now that I'm a parent. And I try to never parent through shame, but I'm sure that I mess that up sometimes. Nevertheless, I don't remember any conversations around shame when I was growing up. None of us is meant to carry shame. It will cause us to make bad decisions every time. It will drive a wedge in all of our most cherished relationships. We must not carry around shame. And the really great news is that we don't have to when we tell the truth to ourselves and others about what's really going on inside. If you haven't heard of Brené Brown and her research around shame and vulnerability, I would encourage you to look it up, because the first time I heard it, all I could think was, this is the conversation I've been waiting my whole life for. And wow, she's really talking about these things, and so many people are going to be set free. So Brené Brown. Number 5, I've learned that I really need a lot of grace, and I feel very loved when people give it to me. So I'm compelled to give it to people as well. In other words, oh, that person's just like me, and they need grace too, so I'd better give it now so I can receive it later when I need it. And that doesn't really sound 100% selfless, but that's okay. I think that's kind of how it works, at least for me. Number 6, I've learned that attitude and perspective are key in life, and that I frequently need to adjust both, because I am an Eeyore, and I don't know why. I think I was just born that way. So this usually happens for me. I can take some deep breaths, do some stretching, walking around. Gratitude practices are good. Honest communication is really hard but good. And then listening to someone else's perspective on things, on life, listening to their story, helps me get a more fully orbed idea of what it means to be human. So this leads right into number 7. I've learned that I can glean the good and helpful bits from an experience or a message and just leave the rest, instead of wholesale canceling someone else as if they don't have anything to teach me. Every person has something to teach me and you. Speaking of gleaning, I've always loved the book called Proverbs because I love the nature of wisdom. Jesus said in Matthew 11:19, wisdom is proved right by her deeds. So that makes me feel like nobody can cheat when it comes to wisdom. Those who seek wisdom can learn to recognize it, but those who don't seek wisdom often can't realize it even if it slaps them across the face. And it might slap them across the face. I want to be a seeker of wisdom, and also, of course, the wisdom giver. Number 8, I've learned that honest self-reflection and communication contributes to better and authentic relationships and real joy. When I mentioned earlier that I was unable to express myself until well into my 20s, I mean it. I had not yet learned the truth that myself mattered, and that I needed to know myself and be my honest self with other selves so that we could have a real connection and understanding between us. It's usually messy, it's often painful, and it's always worthwhile. Number 9 is really short, and I'm just going to drop it and leave it because I think it's like a whole sermon series. Life is not divided into secular and sacred. It's all sacred for those who are in God. Number 10, people are much more important than things, status, or money. And so much pain and suffering we see in the world is due to humans living like those other things are more important than their fellow beings. I think I read kind of fast. So in closing, I want to commiserate with all of you. We humans are good at putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable. As an example, when I was younger and more fundamentally religious in an evangelical American sort of a way, the thought that God knows my heart filled me with fear and shame. God knows who I hate, what things I think about, all my cowardly fears. But now with my current perspective of God, the thought, God knows my heart, gives me peace. Because I know God will do what I cannot do, as I keep being honest with God about who I am and what I'm struggling with. Love is the number one characteristic of a Jesus follower, according to Jesus in the book called John, chapter 13, verses 34 and 35. He said, "A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." And in Luke 6:32, Jesus said, "If you only love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them." And who could forget 1 John 4:7 and 8, especially if you learned the children's song in children's church. "Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. And whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love." Love changes everything. Love changes hearts. Love frees us. Love is the answer. I hope you can grow in God's love for you so that every corner of your heart and mind are touched by that glorious truth, and you may go in freedom to unleash love on the rest of the world. Thank you for listening. You're all really quiet. It's kind of awkward, but I hope you have a good day and be blessed.